Honorable Ministers, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, all, good afternoon. And indeed, I must add my own word of welcome to this childhood obesity conference, which I think is not just impatient of debate, but impatient of action. For far too long in this region, we have sat down on the sidelines debating these issues, and now it is time for us to take some decisive action, and therefore the timeliness of this exercise cannot be overstated as we welcome the opportunity for us to work on a roadmap as to treat with this serious issue. Now, just to set the context within which we are operating, we have to take cognizance of the following facts. One, more than 60% of Caribbean adults are obese. 20 to 35% of adolescents are overweight or obese. 50 to 60% of our labor force is exactly one paycheck away from poverty. 25% of our labor force, at least in some member states, earn at the level of the minimum wage. And our highest minimum wage in the region is only 59.7% of the U.S. federal minimum wage. I'm sharing these pieces of information not to be gratuitous, but to point out and make this to establish a link that our costs in the region track what obtains in our major trading partner, which is usually the United States. But our wages do no such thing. And the fact of life is that part of the challenge that we are facing is that it is cheaper for persons to buy the imported processed foods, the cheaper items that are laden with saturated fats, etc., because it is so much cheaper for them to do, and they are working with a limited budget. Now, to deal with this sort of issue requires a proactive approach. As I said in the opening remark, that this is our call for action. So we have to treat with this in a very proactive manner, I would dare say to you, ladies and gentlemen, that what we need to really effect a process of change is by treating this in the way of a strategic alliance. We have to form an alliance between the private sector, the public sector, and our civil society movement, so that when we are moving in concert. We're moving to effect a process of change without necessarily being disruptive to persons' business models, etc. Because, for example, when we are speaking about, and one of my hopes coming out of this confab will be for us to really look at the development of standards, start to initialize a process of thought where we look at standards in terms of reducing sugar content in, for example, some of the flavored drinks that we have, etc. Do it in such a manner. We'll do it gradually, obviously, not trying to, it doesn't have to be overtly radical in the first sense, but start to sensitize people, start that process where we develop standards whereby reduce sugar content, etc., because the fact of life is that we cannot afford. The imperative, the fundamental imperative, is we cannot afford not to do anything. Inaction is not part of the makeup. So we have to get all hands on deck because the status quo is completely unsustainable. Now, what is the approach? The approach that I would suggest to us as we move forward in these deliberations is, one, we have to do moral suasion and, of course, public education. For far too many of our young people, we find that they are not, some of them don't even know what are the indigenous foods anymore, right? When they identify what they see on television and what is marketed to them, we need to at least reestablish the link between what is indigenous, what is healthy, and what we can do, and see if we can creatively bring people back to the fore. So as one, we have to ensure on standards for labeling, so that what people are buying, they actually know what they're actually purchasing. And if it would be nice if we could add the caloric content of some of these things, particularly in terms of the fast food chains, etc., because people, let the buyer beware. Then, of course, there's the aspect of it you have to treat with, which is legislative reform. We have to look carefully at our laws to ensure that we do have in place adequate protection for our citizens, and of course for the business and the climate in which they operate. But we have to ensure that everybody is operating on a level playing field, and we also have to develop the pieces of legislation must be done in such a way, or modified in such a way if needs be, to ensure the sustainability of what we're doing here. And of course that includes the standards. Then you have to look at a fiscal framework, because clearly, whereas by using a model where you have public, private, and civil society partnerships, you still will have to put in place some mechanism that will keep everybody on an even keel. And some of that might require some fiscal framework, which might, as obtained, for example, United States, some parts of it, you might have a soft drink tax. You might have specific imposts that have been put in place, basically which can be used to supplement the healthcare costs that comes with some of the issues here. I'm not being prescriptive, but I'm saying that this is something that we need to also pay some attention to, because to treat with this situation, all ideas must contend. Nothing must be taken off the table. But if we are serious, and we need to be serious because we can't afford the consequences of what's going on. Then we also have to look at the strategic and targeted political intervention, because to treat with items of this nature, you have to have a political champion. You have to have that sort of political consensus which will make the initiatives not just acceptable to whichever party is in power, but across the political spectrum, including your political oppositions in the various territories. And you need people again, and you need, of course, in all of this, to go right back to where you started, which is a case of moral suasion and public education. Because, and I'm repeating that, because of its absolute imperative to really sell this situation, because people need to know what is it that you're buying, what are the healthy alternatives, and how we can really address the issue of obesity. When we have opportunities through, for example, our nutrition programs in schools, we have situations whereby persons can be substituting, and I'm just making suggestions, but you can be substituting a fruit, whereas you would ordinarily put in some sort of snack in the children's lunchbox. But at the end of the day, it must be let the buyer beware. Let people know exactly what they are buying. And we need to, of course, develop standards that treat with things like trans fats, the amount of salt that is going into products, the amount of sugar that's going into products, because we have seen, and the evidence is clear, that you have markets which, for example, have soft drinks and sweetened drinks with a fraction of the sugar content that we have in the region, and they're still tasty, they still are quite marketable to the populace in the countries, and therefore it's just a matter of being gradual over time. So, ladies and gentlemen, as I close my remarks, I commend to you that we need to take action. The time for action is now, and as per normal, one would say, good luck with your deliberations. But for me, luck is but an acronym, and the luck means labor under certain knowledge. So with that mandate, may I wish you Godspeed, and that we actually come out of this with a workable roadmap. I thank you very much.